Alright, so I took a trade on Thursday. Today is actually Friday when I'm recording this. So, took a day trade on Thursday here, and it was actually a long. Now, coming into the day, I was kind of having two opposing opinions, higher time frame wise, right? Like I've been mentioning, this week, to be honest, has been a little tricky. Since on the higher time frame, we've been inside of this bullish weekly candle. Now, this is also including today's price action. So it looked slightly different yesterday, but you can see though we were trading into this inversion fair value gap on the weekly. ES, as mentioned previously, we had validated this weekly breaker, and we were trading back into it yesterday. And then YM had actually been a little more aggressive to the upside, but either way, coming into the daily chart, we'll be able to see things a little better. So we had the CPI news release on Wednesday that had a decent expansion to the upside. Now this occurred after sweeping liquidity. So if I turn these drawings on, you'll see this is kind of what I was looking at. We had NQ, which has been, at least this week, the lagger to the upside. And you'll see that if I pull up ES and put them right next to each other, ES had actually traded up on Wednesday, closed above this daily fair value gap. And then on Thursday, today's trade, we are actually trading back down into that fair value gap. And I'll get into that more later. But on NQ, you see we engaged it just the low end, and then we closed off of that on Wednesday. And then we actually, this morning, we're trading above this fair value gap. So we had the SMT down here, which was formed with YM. YM obviously has been a lot more bullish to the upside. This was our trade day. This is obviously, don't ignore Friday here. But we had large displacement to the upside, so I was thinking, okay, maybe we're seeing either a higher time frame reversal, or is it just a short-term retracement into, premium PD arrays, which we were seeing on that weekly chart. So moving down into the hourly, I was seeing a few things. So let's go to about 8 o'clock here. Coming into the morning, right, we had obviously the week leading up to this. We had Monday's move higher. We had the Tuesday retracement, which actually retraced perfectly to OTE. Right here, we traded right into OTE on this retracement on Tuesday, and then obviously reversed and had that CPI news release that really blasted up and took out the highs here. That also validated this daily fair value gap, which got inverted right here as we traded and closed above it. So we inverted that, and then on Wednesday we kind of just had a slow push up into overnight session where it was a little lethargic, and then we came in on the inside of London and actually had this expansion higher. So you can see in the morning we had taken out, a good amount of liquidity, not only here but also on ES, which ES was obviously trading above the daily as mentioned. And then YM had actually taken out highs. So we were seeing a little bit of SMT now at the highs. So this is what I mean by I was seeing two different, opposing views, which kind of made today's trade not the best. And that is mainly due to why I cut it prematurely, understanding I was just not trading in an ideal trading environment. So plan was basically to potentially see some kind of liquidity sweep below here, a purge, and then revert and continue higher, because I figure we are now in, expansion of the move. We had the more aggressive indices, closing above the daily fair value gaps, and I was thinking maybe if we saw a retracement on ES and then we held, it would be showing support from the inverted fair value gap, and then we could see some continuation. So that was the ideal plan, and then obviously let's drop down to a 15. You'll see as we progress throughout the morning, it was a pretty consolidative type of day. So by the time we hit 10 o'clock, we actually had ran sell side liquidity here. Now, we had also ran it on ES, and then YM had ran it earlier in the morning, but was now kind of creating these equal lows below Wednesday's AM swing point, swing low here. So there wasn't any SMT down here, which I would have liked to see, but as I keep going to 11 o'clock, what there was is ES was now actually holding. It pulled back to that daily fair value gap and now was holding it. So it had inverted the daily by trading above it, and then we traded back to it, and it was now showing support after the sweep of this liquidity right here. And then we had kind of some displacement to the upside. But all in all, it was still not the most conducive action, because you can see we just kind of were in this slow, methodical retracement that took out a bit of sell side. We had that upside with after the liquidity grab and then the hold of the fair value gap here. So I actually ended up going in on a 5-minute after seeing all this. However, we also had a sweep of this high here. However, there was no sweep here, so there was also now kind of different lower time frame SMTs, but I kind of was like, okay, well, ES is the stronger, maybe that's why it swept it. But what we didn't get on ES was a strong close above this. You can see we ended up actually closing back inside of this 15-minute fair value gap. So that's not very good for the long either, but I decided to get into a 5-minute chart, use this as a market structure shift here, closing above this high, kind of like a breaker, and I was willing to enter in on this 5-minute fair value gap with a risk to the low. I wasn't expecting, a speedy move here. I was expecting maybe a nice drawn out move, which if I'm expecting that, I shouldn't even really be getting in the trade anyways. But I did, and then I got tagged in. And you'll see ES would have been the better one to trade since it had been the stronger one, because I eventually exited the trade early after we had some closure below the 5-minute fair value gap here at 11:35. I exited, and then shortly after that, we actually ended up taking out these lows, so I saved myself a good amount of capital by exiting early. But overall, if I just go back to this day entirely, it ended up just being a slow, retracement into the imbalance formed on CPI the day prior, and the other indices had a less of a retracement. You can see here we actually never reached that imbalance, and then YM just literally just went sideways, never even ran those equal lows that were formed in the morning. So all in all, it wasn't the greatest day to trade, and you can see with the structure that a retracement was actually kind of the better play, since we had just expanded, taken out a good amount of liquidity. We also had that SMT up here, even though maybe you thought we were going to go higher due to the liquidity that had already been taken, and also the large expansion, it was probably best to either just avoid or look for some slight downside. Because then obviously coming into today, we had that retracement, and then you can see we expanded higher again, running for these highs. So let me just show you the executions. You can see entered in on that fair value gap here, and then got out just before this candle took out these lows, got out at 361 prematurely.